We live in a society where everything has its own price. Nothing is for free. And that makes us sometimes think that we have what we deserve. And in this kind of society, the Word of God comes to us to show who we really are. So today, in the first reading, we have the last part of the story about Naaman. Naaman, that at the beginning of the story, the book of Kings told us that he was a Syrian that in that kingdom, he was not the king, but a very important guy there. And he became sick with leprosy. And he was so sad that one of his servants, a woman, Hebrew, told him that he can visit the prophet Elisha. So he prepared the trip and went to visit Elisha. And when he arrived to the home of Elisha, Elisha don't invite him to come into the house. And also Elisha answered him from his home, don't even go out to speak with him. But Elisha told the man that he must go to the river Jordan and wash himself 7 times. So Naaman became angry with Elisha because he thought that he was a very important person and Elisha was very rude with him. And so he was so angry that he decided to went back to his home. And again, his servants told him, well, you did this trip to visit the prophet. Why don't you, before going home, why don't you just wash yourself as the prophet said? So even if he was very, very angry, he decided to do what the prophet said. After this, he became cleansed. And so his mood changed. And so he, instead of going back to his home, he went back to Elisha and offered him a present. And again, Elisha don't accept the present. And so he decided, because he was full of gratitude, he decided that from that moment on, he will praise only the Lord of Israel. Why Elisha didn't receive him? Because he was a prophet for the Hebrews and not for the Syrians. And so he hadn't got any interest in met Naaman. And he preferred not to have any kind of relationship with this Syrian. That was the problem. During the life of Jesus, Jesus sometimes was compared what the prophets in general, of course, he was known as one of the prophets, but especially was compared with Elisha. there are some they look like the same. For example, Elisha have disciples. Jesus had disciples. Elisha healed some people, in this case, Naaman. Jesus, if we read the gospel, also healed a lot of people. So the gospel compare sometimes Jesus with Elisha. And in this text, okay, here. In this text, we have this comparison. First, we must know that when the gospel speak about leprosy, it's not the leprosy that we know nowadays. It's not the same sickness. It's leprosy in the gospel is every kind of spot that we can have in our skin, wound or sore that we can have in the skin. And the problem for the Hebrews, especially if we lose blood, this was terrible for the Hebrews. So all those people were named here in the Gospels as lepers, and the Gospels don't see these people as sick person as we can see nowadays, but the Gospels see these people as the Hebrews saw them, so impure. That means people that are full of sin, and for this they cannot be part of the prayers of the Hebrews. They cannot go to the synagogue with the other Hebrews. They cannot go to the temple of Jerusalem, and they cannot live in the cities where there were Hebrews. So for this, the gospel said today that when Jesus was entering in a village, 10 lepers met him. So they were outside the village, and they were not allowed to be close to the Hebrews. For this, the gospel says that they raised their voices. So from the distance, they cry out to Jesus, telling him what they need. Jesus, in this case, don't do anything except Jesus answer their claim and said to them, go to the priest. Because at that time, the priests were in charge of certifying that a person that was impure now become pure. So the 10 guys do what Jesus ordered them to do. So in this sense, it's different also from Naaman, that at the very beginning he doesn't like to wash himself. The text says that when they were in their way to the priest, these men became clean. But one of them realized that he was clean, so he go back to Jesus, and in the case of the gospel, Jesus don't refuse like Elijah to be in touch with the guy, but Jesus accept him, and Jesus said to him, your faith has saved you. So the relationship, the gospel tried to teach us that we are in a relationship with Jesus, and the relationship with Jesus is through the faith. We believe in Jesus. It's not a faith that is blind. We don't just follow something without knowing who we are following. We follow Jesus, and we follow Jesus because he gave us his word. Here in the gospel, Jesus said something. And what Jesus said, the word of Jesus do what the word promised to us. So it's an effective word. So we believe in his word. If you remember the gospel last Sunday, the gospel speak and tell us that we can grow in our faith, but the gospel don't teach us how we can grow in our faith. Here, the gospel said something about how we can grow in our faith. And the way to grow in our faith is through gratitude. So if we believe in Jesus, we are called to watch our life and realize all the things that Jesus do in our own life and give him thanks. So the gospel teaches us that if we believe, we are called to be thankful, to give, to be full of gratitude to God through Jesus. If you see the gospel, you can see that 10 men were cured. We don't know what was happened with the 9 that went back to Jesus. Perhaps they give thanks to God, perhaps, but not to Jesus. We as Christians gave thanks to God through Jesus. That is important for us. So the gospel today, and another thing that is different from the first reading and the gospel. In the first reading, the whole story, we know that Naaman was Syrian since the very beginning of the reading. And the prophet didn't like to have any kind of relationship with him. In the gospel, we know that there were 10 men that were in need. That's the only thing that for Jesus was important. But at the end of the gospel, or almost at the end of the gospel, we know that the one that went back to Jesus was a Samaritan. But the problem is not that he belongs to another race or another tribe or whatever. The problem is that Samaritans for the Hebrews were enemies, and Jesus didn't care about that. So that is also important for us. So for the Hebrews, the Samaritans were the bad guys, and they were the good guys. So we can ask, following this or listening this word of God, we can ask ourselves, perhaps in our following of Jesus, perhaps in our discipleship, we think that we are the good guys, but perhaps we don't give thanks to Jesus for all the gift that we receive. Or perhaps we are the bad guy, like the Samaritan, that believe in Jesus and are able to give thanks for all the gifts that he received. That is the question that the gospel leaves to us.